pro-Trump think tank leader makes ominous threat about Second American Revolution. I don't know what this is going to be. If this is going to be a QAnon person, that they're claiming is all of the MAGA movement or whatever. I don't know if it's going to be something ridiculous like that, or if this is going to be like a base statement. Just going to have to watch together and see what happens.
Leaders on the right are applauding the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity, including the president of the Heritage Foundation, who says that it's vital to getting the country back.
I was trying to pause. Heritage Foundation president? Okay, not a QAnon guy. We are in the process of a second American Revolution. I hope so, but let's see.
As he gives an ominous warning to the left. Listen.
In spite of all this nonsense from the left, we are going to win. We're in the process of taking this country back. We are in the process of the second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Okay, I see where they're going with this. But yeah, I mean, you can only push people so far. I mean, what do you think?
CNN's Kristen Holmes is here. So, Kristen, help us understand what that second American Revolution that he's promising entails.
So before we get started, because I'm going to use this magic wall, I just want to note that I've actually never been allowed to touch this before. So please bear with me as we get through this. Okay, so first let's talk about who that person was. Kevin Roberts. He is the head of the Heritage Foundation. The reason why we care about this is a conservative think tank, a very prominent one, but also they are the umbrella organization of what is called Project 2025.
I keep hearing about Project 2025. There's a video that I didn't put on my playlist today that said, what is 2025? Trump denies being a part of it at all. But as we've covered relentlessly today, candidates, especially Trump, say a lot of things they don't actually mean. So let's see.
And essentially what Project 2025 is,
thank you,
is that this was set up by not just the Heritage Foundation, but dozens of conservative think tanks from across the country, many of whom have former administration officials of Donald Trump's. And they did this to essentially avoid what happened in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected and there was no kind of infrastructure in place. And they had to start from scratch when it came to a transition. They wanted everything to be in place so that a transition would be smooth. Now, the one caveat of all of this, when we link it to the Trump campaign, is yes, they are doing this for a potential Trump administration. But on the other part of this, the campaign has said that anything that comes from anyone other than the campaign is not from the campaign and should not be considered that way. So the reason why I say that is because some of what the Project 2025 has put out there is very controversial. So
I have to look more into what they say they're going to do, but I don't necessarily think this is a terrible thing. Like I said, I have to see exactly what they want to do or what they say they're going to do. But I think it is a good idea and maybe something that other political movements should take a look at and say, okay, this is the conservative idea for what should happen, when power's taken and all those kinds of things. But I think like having a playbook, putting together training and personnel and putting out what your agenda is and all that kind of stuff, all those bullet points there, I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that idea. And I think that more groups should do that. And I think if you can do that, and obviously this is coming from the Heritage Foundation, I think that I don't know if they're necessarily neocons, but obviously they're going to have some things that I disagree with in there. But I think if you can put together that kind of policy package, that sort of plan together, I think that there's value in that. Not only showing that you take your role seriously and what you want to do and what you want to achieve, but it also kind of gives people a better understanding of what they'd be getting if they chose to elect you or support you. I think this is I have to look more into this. I've never seen, I know that these plans are made up in other areas, but I've never actually seen it be so public. And I wonder if that couldn't be a beneficial strategy to other movements. I don't know.
They basically have these four pillars: policy, agenda, personnel. They're building out a huge network of, basically, it was actually described to me as a dating website for conservatives, the kind of infrastructure to match conservatives with jobs in a potential administration, training them to work on day one, what that would look like, and a playbook for what the first 180 days would look like of a conservative administration.
So walk us through this.
Like I said, that's not, there's probably things in here that I would disagree with. I haven't seen enough about it, but I think that's a good idea so that people know what to expect and what's coming. And I think from a strategic point of view, it's obviously what you would want. Why would you want to go into something blind? Obviously, you're going to get prepared ahead of time. So
This policy agenda.
So basically, they have these 4 parts within the policy agenda of what they say will make America better. And here are some of the ways that they say they do that.
Okay.
Restoring the family at the centerpiece of American life,
base, what's wrong with that?
protecting our children, self-governance, dismantling the administrative state and returning self-governance to the American people. One of the things we've talked about extensively is one of the plans for Donald Trump.
Also based. I don't know how long she's going to talk about this, but so far 2 for 2. I'm on board. What else you got?
Trump has said this himself as well, but also Project 2025 is to essentially give more power to the executive branch and take.
Whoa, can you not read? Dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. That policy sounds good, but that is not what she said.
About extensively is one of the plans for Donald Trump has said this himself as well, but also Project 2025 is to essentially give more power to the executive branch and take some of these government agencies, and that would include agencies like the Department of Justice, and move them under the executive branch. So right now in the Constitution,
I don't think that would be a good idea at all if that's the case. I don't trust anything CNN says, just like I don't trust anything any candidate says. But if that's true, that's awful. That would be terrible. Get rid of the DOJ or get rid of, some of these agencies. We want to get rid of the Department of Education. We don't want to put the Department of Education under the purview of the president. No, we don't want that.
Constitution, there's nothing that says that the Department of Justice is separate from the administrative branch. We've just operated like that under essentially decorum for the past several decades. They're saying that shouldn't exist anymore. You also have this idea of defending the nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats.
Isn't that already the case? Like, that is their duty. They just abdicate that duty or they pawn it off on somebody else. Policy number 3. Defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. I mean, there's a lot of people that think that government's job is to keep you safe, so I don't see how that wouldn't fall under that category. What's so bad about this one?
Obviously, a lot of references here to immigration, but also the idea of an America.
There's one reference to immigration, unless you count global threat. Okay.
First policy, kind of ignoring our global allies and focusing on America first.
Yes. Yes. So far, the things that she's saying, some concerns obviously, but from what's being written and what's written there, doesn't seem all that crazy. And yes, we should not be, I think it was one of the founding fathers said something about foreign entanglements, being wary of such things and not being bogged down in other people's problems. Yeah, I'm all for that. Yeah.
And then liberty, securing our God-given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty.
Yeah.
Why do you say it like that's a bad thing? People always especially atheists, they always want to come out and say or even agnostic people will say, well, I don't believe in a God, so does that mean that I don't have any rights? No, dumbass. All it means is that your rights are inherent to you, that they come from, whether you believe in God or not, it is beneficial to have it there, because if you say, well, they come from nowhere, then you sound like an idiot. But if you say they come from God, some people will say, well, you might, whatever, shut up. It doesn't mean that you don't, just because you don't believe in God, that you don't have these rights. These rights are inherent to you. That is the point. There is nothing secure our God-given individual rights to live freely for what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty. Look at her face. Up there. Look at her. Why do you read that sentence and you're like, ew, yucky? What the fuck is wrong with you?
Very sort of typical flowery platitude language, but underneath it, it comes with the promise of a reworking of the federal government to specific aims that we haven't seen before.
Well, that would be.
Haven't we not? I mean, the one they were talking there before about getting rid of the administrative state. I mean, yeah, we have seen that world before. It was before we had the administrative state. What are you talking about?
Be a huge change in the executive power and give unprecedented amount of power to someone like Donald Trump if he were.
Okay, so the only way I think that she could take that takeaway, because I know I keep pausing it a lot, and I'm sorry, but I just thought of this. The only way that I could see her interpreting the words of getting rid of the administrative state as consolidating more power under the presidency is if she thinks that without, like, government has a right to do all these things and government is bound to do these things, but it's great right now because we have all these bureaucracies and all these institutions set up. But once we get rid of them, well, somebody's got to do it. So obviously it's the president. Like, unless it's written, I haven't read 2025 Project or whatever, and I'm kind of interested to look into it more now, but unless it says that, then I think she's basing all of these conclusions off that very wrong assumption. Just because, again, I'm going to use the Department of Education as an example, but just because we get rid of the Department of Education doesn't mean that the president becomes the principal of all schools. It's not how that works. We get rid of the Department of Education, and then schooling goes back to the states. And then, hey, in a perfect world, we get rid of that too, and it goes back to communities and local communities and those kind of things. And we can share information across, borders. We don't have to live in this world where we have this Department of Education that tells everybody how to learn and what to study and all this kind of. We don't have to live in that world. And just because it goes away doesn't mean that power is then consolidated under the president. And I use the Department of Education, but this applies to pretty much everything. I don't understand how they come to this conclusion. I need to read this now. You look what you're doing, lady. You're making me read.
To win. But the other part of this is, like, when you talk about protecting children and family, this is kind of what they're getting at.
Okay, she's going to say.
Rescind regulations prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, transgender status, and sex characteristics.
Okay. Rescind regulations prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, transgender status, and sex characteristics. Okay. Like, I don't understand where we got into this, like, I mean, I kind of understand because I kind of grew up in it, I guess. So I understand where everybody's coming from. Oh, we have to have equal, access to all great things and, whatever. It can't be. Listen, in a truly free world, you could discriminate against anyone for any reason. And if it turns out that you're a racist asshole, if it turns out that you're a misogynist or, whatever the man version of that is, I can't remember right now. If it turns out that you're just an awful person, then people will disassociate from you. And if you're okay with that, or only associating with other narrow-minded people, that should be your right too. Like, there is an argument I could make and probably agree with that public access or public property or all these kinds of things, to the extent that these things are allowed to exist, there should not be any sort of discrimination against those things. That being said, privately, if you don't want to bake the cake, you should not be forced to bake the cake. If you want to have a restaurant and not serve black people, that's kind of your right. And it's incumbent on the rest of the people, like myself, to say, you're a fucking racist. I'm not going to give you money. I don't care how good your chicken is. We can't be friends. I can't be associated with this place. And then that place goes out of business. Like, this, I understand why they're upset about this one, but again, I'm not really super upset about this. And obviously what they're talking about here, rescind regulations prohibiting discrimination on sexual orientation, gender identity, transgender status, and sex characteristics. This is all the gender war shit. This is all, men and female sports and that kind of stuff. Yeah, if the if the WNBA wants to allow men to pretend to be women and compete in those categories and just stomp the competition and whatever, it might actually help their ratings. I'm not against them doing that, but I would be against them saying, like, well, and by them I mean the government, I would be against the government coming in and saying, no, you have to allow this transgender athlete to participate in the WNBA. no, like the WNBA should be able to choose who it wants to allow. And if it should decide that only women can compete in a women's basketball league and only what they define as real women, whatever, that should be the case. It shouldn't be that the government comes in and regulates all this stuff. We get so bogged down in identity politics. It drives me nuts.
And that we have heard is very much part of the Republican platform. They say all the time, Donald Trump, you hear him say it, that he thinks that men shouldn't be in women's sports. They talk about sexual education within schooling. They want that out of any kind of education system. So these are kind of what some of
that's like the number one reason that I don't want to send my kids to public school at all. Like, I'd much rather homeschool, neighborhood schooling, that kind of stuff. I would much rather do anything like that because I just cannot. I don't want them to be exposed to the sort of stuff that, you see all these bad headlines about. And you might say, oh, well, it's just one school. It's just this one area in California. No, this is the problem with the Department of Education is because it starts there. And then before you know it, it becomes nationwide, and it's a level of indoctrination. It's one thing to say, Abraham Lincoln was the best president ever and never did nothing wrong. It's one thing to indoctrinate children that way. It's on a different level to pervert their minds in that way. Y'all know what I'm getting at.
Of what they have outlined here. I believe this is the one. Policies, this one would obviously likely apply to Donald Trump here. Prepare a plan to end immediately any policies, investigations, or cases that are contrary to law or administration policies.
Prepare a plan to end immediately any policies, investigations, or cases that run contrary to law or administration policies. I mean, isn't that what are they saying? Like, shut down investigations of Donald Trump? Well, he's president. Of course he'd want to do that. I don't understand what the hubbubaloo is about this.
How exactly would that look? Particularly given what Paula was just reporting about trying to get cases even passed when he was elected. A lot of this stuff, it seems traditional, but it has been very controversial. It seems traditional for Republicans, but it's very controversial and goes pretty far.
And it goes back to that idea of...
Y'all didn't go over that one. FDA reversed its approval of chemical abortion drugs. I mean, I don't think the FDA should exist, but I also think, if you want to have abortion drugs, you should be able to get access to them if you want them. Ensure that every state reports exactly how many abortions take place within its borders. I don't know that that's a necessary thing. I would say to the extent that we're paying for them, we should know what they are. What are we paying for? That kind of thing. I'm not really seeing anything in here that's super objectionable. These are just my autistic brain just going after this.
Republicans, but it's very controversial and goes pretty far.
And it goes back to that idea of an executive with unprecedented power. Kristen Holmes, you did fantastic for your first time.
I really felt like I was.
How did it feel? Felt good?
Yeah, I felt good. I felt like I was getting the clicks in. So really, thank you. Thanks for this opportunity.
Of course, we'll do it again.
Yes.
Appreciate.
Oh my God, such annoying shit. So pro-Trump think tank leader makes ominous threat about Second American Revolution. That was the title of the video. Not exactly what I was thinking there. I want to go back to his comment just one more time because that was the title of the video, and I feel like most of it was spent on this 2025 crap, but let's see.
Nonsense from the left, we are going to win. We're in the process of taking this country back. We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Yeah, I think that second part, or that those final words, those are the ones that they're probably zeroing in on, and I kind of expected them to talk more about. But as far as it being like a second revolution and all that kind of stuff, I mean, look, from the stuff that I saw, from what they just presented there, are there things on the edges that I kind of disagree with or have concerns about? Clearly, I stated those. Overall, though, Second American Revolution sounds pretty damn good. I don't know what you want, like getting government out of your business, reducing the administrative state, putting the focus back on families. I think that's pretty good. So, hey, I don't know. Second American Revolution, let's go. And to his point, about it remaining peaceful as long as the left wants to, I think it's very obvious what he's talking about there. Every time the left doesn't get its way, it gets violent. And people on the left are going to point and say, look at what happened on January 6th and all this kind of stuff. And you have some point there. But I'll say that there's a difference between, rampaging through the Capitol and burning down multiple major cities across the country over a period of months. There's a big difference there. And if you don't see the difference, then you're willfully ignorant of that fact. So I think what he's alluding to there is Donald Trump's very likely to win. And if and when that happens, there very likely is a plan in place. Whether Trump wants to recognize it as the 2025 plan or whether his own people have put together his own plan for what they want to do and how they want to achieve their goals. I think it's ignorant to think that there's not a plan. And what he's saying is that, this is likely to happen. And when it does, they expect there to be a reaction. But we're not going to sit there and just fucking take it. And you saw that in some of these cities. There were certain cities that were burned down and other cities that weren't. And there are some commonalities between those cities that were and weren't. So I think what he's saying is we're not going to put up with this shit, and we're gonna fix things, make them better, at least from his point of view. And if you're acting in self-defense, I can't really argue against you. Anyway, that's the video. That's probably it for today. Follow. See you next time.